This is the final episode of the Reflections on Resilience podcast, providing a space for Hounslow residents to gain a deeper understanding of mental health and how we can support our own emotional well-being. And we hope you, our listeners, find support in the knowledge, resources and suggestions you'll find here. This podcast is brought to you by Hounslow Creative People and Places and funded by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, distributed by Arts Council England. Listen on to hear from Madiva, who works in Hounslow within mental health. Welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name's Madiva and I'm a social worker from the Adults Locality Mental Health team in Hounslow, and I've been a social worker practicing for about 2.5 years now. The role changes a lot, and I think that was something that I found quite interesting. When I first came into the role, it was mainly about prevention, and that was the sole purpose of the team. So I found it, quite easy to integrate with my community. You just never know what's going to come, and it's always changing. So it's a very interesting kind of area to be in and kind of specialise in.
What we'll do now is we'll do a check-in. So this is basically a creative way of us kind of exploring how we're feeling right now. So the check-in that I've thought of is called Head, Heart, Hands. And so essentially we are going to talk about something that's in our head, so something that we're thinking about, something that's in our heart, something which is like more of a, passion or something in terms of kind of the feeling side, and then something that we're doing, so something that we're kind of like doing with our hands at the moment. Okay, so something that's in my head, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking a lot about nature and how the weather is changing a lot, and we've been really lucky that it's been really good the past kind of couple of days. So yeah, thinking a lot about how things are feeling like a little bit less heavy now after the really, really heavy winter that we've had. And something in my heart, something I'm feeling. Yeah, kind of in relation to that, feeling quite positive about the future and about things hopefully beginning to open up again and us moving out of this lockdown, and yeah, feeling quite positive and hopeful. Something I'm doing. So I have been painting recently. So myself and my husband have been setting out a couple of hours on a weekend to do some painting, which is something that we're not, neither of us would say that we're kind of very good at it, but it's just been so much fun to just do something new and to do something a bit more creative.
That's brilliant. What made you guys pick painting?
I don't really know. I think because it's something that is out of both of our comfort zones, because I am involved in the world of photography and filmmaking and all of that kind of thing. That comes quite easily to me, whereas painting does not come easily to me. So it's like a nice thing for us to both explore together as beginners.
That's really sweet. Okay. I think going off of what you're saying, my one was quite similar. I think on about 3 days ago is when I realised we've entered the spring season, and when I was talking to a lot of the clients I was speaking to recently, this is quite personal to me, they're like, oh, Madiva, it's springtime, or we're going to be let out a bit longer, or it's still light at 6 o'clock. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I really enjoy that as well. I enjoy finishing work and seeing it's still light outside and I can be in my garden. So that was some of the things I think I was just shifting into this weekend. I'm going to change all of my shift from winter to summer clothes, and I'm going to start thinking about how I can kind of make my space a bit more happy and brighter, if that makes sense. In my heart, kind of going off of that, I was thinking about all the changes I wanted to make to my room. So I got a lot of plants in here. I think there's 20-25 plants, and in my mind I was feeling very happy because I realized a lot of for example, my tulips were coming through, and that's letting me know tulips mean spring, it's a nice bright start. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to make sure all my plants are potted properly and make sure they all have room. And I was feeling really happy about that, because I was like, oh, this is something I can do, and I can do with the days being longer. And in terms of with my hands, what I was doing, I think it's quite similar to you. I was wanting to I feel like every month I picked up a new hobby and then put down the previous one. This month I'm making candles and then just giving them out to whoever says, oh, do you want a candle? Yeah, whoever says they want one's getting a candle. And then last month it was knitting, this month's candles. Probably going to change to repotting my plants and stuff like that. So I'm quite happy to kind of feel like I'm taking on spring activities and feel like I'm looking forward to like longer and brighter days. So yeah, it's just about kind of shifting into I don't know why spring just feels like a bit more of a positive mindset, but kind of shifting into spring happiness.
Yeah, really hearing some similarities in us and that experience of like moving from winter to spring, which is a massive shift for us here in the UK, like in terms of weather, but also like the springtime, it's like this time for like spring cleaning and Easter and new beginnings and all of that stuff, like really feeling the shift there, definitely. Okay, so do you want to tell us a little bit about how like the past year has been for you as a mental health professional?
So it was, I think I can honestly say hand on heart, it was nothing like what I expected it to be, and it's nothing that I've experienced in my working career. So I literally remember this time last year still kind of adjusting to the fact that I wouldn't be going into the office, and a large part of our work was face-to-face meetings and people just coming in off the street to talk about their mental health and how they're feeling. So that kind of shift to moving online was a lot to adjust to. As a professional, I think it took I would say probably a few weeks, if not months, kind of adjusting to the new change in pace and expectations of me as a community mental health social worker who couldn't be in the community. So it was definitely a big adjustment period, and I initially thought it was only going to be for about 2 weeks to roughly about a month. So I was like, okay, it's just a quick thing, but I'm not going to let go of my links in the community or my community spaces, so it's fine. And just having to deal with every re-lockdown and stuff like that, I feel like I'm a lot more malleable and easygoing now with the flow, because we've been in this for so long. We've been able to create new kind of structures.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience of thinking that it was going to be a short-term thing, and then it just dragged on and on. But yeah, so I was thinking, like, your work is so much about community and about being with people and connections. How have you found it, like, not being able to do a lot of that face-to-face work, especially at certain points?
It's been so difficult. I'm not even going to try and say, oh, there have been some, I think, positives with working online for people who maybe didn't feel comfortable enough to stand in front of me face to face and say, this is what's going on for me, because I recognize that's very overwhelming. But on the flip side, I think it kind of created a lot more kind of concerns and a lot of professional anxiety for me, because I knew that a large part of the community that I worked with weren't online, which is why they used to walk into drop-in spaces. So the fact that those drop-in spaces weren't open and we weren't being given dates about when they would open, I remember feeling a lot of professional anxiety about, can I go out and even just knock on the door to say, I am still here, I can't come into your house because this was like the first lockdown, and then being okay with it. Because I know that, for example, I know one client I have, he won't even answer the phone, even if I call him, if I text him, if anything. I literally have to go and knock on his door every week, and not being able to do that at the beginning of the lockdown was having me feeling like I can send 10, 20 letters, but he's not going to be able to respond back to me to say, Madiva, I've heard what you said. So I just found it very challenging at the beginning, and feeling like, even though my team was really supportive and I knew that everyone was going through the same thing as me, feeling like almost embarrassed to say I don't know how to connect with, even the people who were online, the people who could communicate with me over email and, over Zoom conversations. It was just missing that personal aspect of, you might be telling me you're okay, but I might see that you're like twiddling your hands or doing something, and I can just say, just talk to me a little bit deeper about what's going on. It just felt like there was just a barrier, and it was one that I found really hard to knock down, and still I'm sometimes finding it hard to knock down.
I think it's really, really, like, it's a completely different thing to communicate via Zoom or like phone calls or text. Like, it's so, so different to working with someone in person. You kind of like, you almost have to see it as a different way of communicating, because it's just not the same. And in terms of your kind of workload, did it increase? Was it more intense?
I remember in, say for example, like March, April 2020, I remember just seeing the numbers just fluctuate. Like, for example, we might have had like 20 people on our duty before, and I remember the numbers at one point were touching 40, 50 of people who were in distress because, like me, they just didn't know what to do. So the workload increased just due to the uncertainty and an anxiety that people are experiencing. And then my professional anxiety then increased because I was like, I want people to know that we're taking everything they're saying seriously, but we're still in the trial and error stage of, I don't even know what service to recommend to you, because 2 weeks ago I said, oh yeah, make contact with this person, but I don't know if they're upline and on and running yet. So it was difficult. I think it was just not something that I think we as services were prepared for, because before the lockdown we weren't really encouraged to engage with people over the phone or over Zoom or anything like that unless they specifically requested it, because the whole point was having someone come in and see you and just being able to go through all the nitty-gritty details. And I remember feeling burnt out probably by about, I think it got to about August, and I was just there like, I remember coming in thinking, who do I prioritize as everyone's a priority, everyone's in distress, and then I'm distressed because my clients are distressed and I'm not too sure what to do. And then I remember it was bad when my line manager was like to me, Madiva, you just don't seem like yourself, you're not, interacting, you're not engaging. And I'm saying, well, anytime that I'm not in a meeting, I'm trying to do all of my work because the workload's increased. And it got to a point where I remember I wouldn't even take my lunch break, because I'm like, that's 45 minutes I could use to do 2 assessments. So I can eat as I work, and then I started to get in that mindset of, have I left the desk today other than to do anything? I was making flasks of coffee, so I didn't even have to leave my desk during the day. And I remember feeling like, if this continues, I'm just gonna have to leave social work. It's just horrible. But yeah, I think it was probably about 3-4 months after we kind of realised that we're going to keep going in and out of lockdown. So I was like, I need to find a better way of handling this, because I'm preaching and I'm telling my clients and I'm talking to them about coping mechanisms, and I'm not taking on board any of the things that I'm saying. And then that disconnect, because we're encouraged to like reflect quite regularly in our practice, I was like, I can't do this.
It's all about balance, and I think it's really amazing to hear how much you kind of care about your clients and how much you're willing to sacrifice to support them, and also to hear that you kind of had this realization that if you weren't able to support yourself, then you wouldn't be able to support them and you'd have to leave social work, which clearly is really important to you. So yeah, sounds like you've been kind of on your own journey as well during this time. In terms of the mental health challenges in the borough of Hounslow, what would you say has changed since lockdown? Has it increased? Has it decreased?
I think I've definitely, from my own personal kind of working point of view and the cases that I was taking on, I think there's been a definite increase in people kind of reporting and experiencing anxiety, kind of panic attacks, the low mood that came along with a lot of people like being furloughed, for example, and depression being tagged onto that. But I think one of the main things that kind of shone out to me is not something I really gave much thought to before lockdown, was agoraphobia and people's fear of like leaving their house and not wanting to socialize, and then it being a bit of a vicious cycle of, I don't want to leave the house because of this pandemic, but then there's nothing for me to do, and I don't want to reach out because everyone's going through the same thing. So one of the things I've noticed personally was we were getting a lot of referrals for people worried about their family members, and they're just saying they're just so depressed now, or they're so isolated, or they're so anxious. And then that kind of puts an increase on our service, because we then have to reach out to the person and keep in contact with the referrer, and then the person might not be at a stage where they're wanting to engage with like services to talk about how they're feeling. So we might put them down as someone we potentially come back to, and that kind of increase alongside our kind of statutory work and doing assessments was kind of, it was almost like doing two jobs in one and doing the double the amount of work online as well with like half the time. It was just very intense.
And in terms of like the kind of demographic of the borough, it's a very ethnically diverse borough. The people that you support, would you say that they are quite diverse, or, you know, is there a predominance of a certain ethnic group that you work with?
When our work was focused on prevention and we were looking, so our teams kind of split into different parts of the borough, we recognised that over half of the like racial kind of demographics in Hounslow identified themselves as maybe white or white British, usually somewhere between 50 to 60%. And then the other I think the numbers were rising, but I think the last time I was looking at the statistics, it was telling me that roughly about 45% of the borough of Hounslow identified themselves as black or ethnic minority groups. And the Asian community was identified in Hounslow as one of the biggest Asian communities in London, in the London boroughs, and the statistics were telling me it was roughly about 30% of the black and ethnic minority group that identified themselves as Asian or Asian British. However, when I was observing with the people that were coming into my drop-ins, for example, when we used to do face-to-face drop-ins, or the cases that I was getting of people at prevention stages, I would say the large majority of the people I was working with were white British. And when we're getting to later stages of maybe people who've had contact with secondary services, or maybe have been detained or have been known to services for a long amount of time, that is usually when I was starting to interact with, I would say, black or ethnic minority group, the other kind of side. So it was quite interesting and something that we kind of noted. I think talking from personal experience, I know that a lot of the time we used to run, for example, a healthy minds drop-in is what we used to call it, and we just base ourselves in the community. And from my own personal observations, I noted that a lot of the people that would walk in to actively, willingly engage with me, like you just said, yeah, was usually white British. But in terms of when I started to research what groups were in the community or what was available, for example, there was an elder Asian community group that met every month in one of the parts of my locality in a community group. They were very welcoming of me into the community, and we were able to talk very openly about mental health, but I had to actively reach out as opposed to them coming to us and saying, can we, work jointly? So I think in terms of like prevention and people accessing the services, that was those were the general themes that I was experiencing. And I was meeting a lot more diverse groups of people, usually when it was coming to statutory work and assessments rather than prevention.
And why do you think people from ethnic minorities did not feel as able to access services, especially kind of like early on prevention?
I think it was, this was a question I used to ask a lot. I didn't mean it to come across as if I was only asking certain types of people, because I generally tried to get this information from everyone that I was talking to. But I think when I was asking, I remember when I was actively had, for example, the first black client that I had worked with, and that was quite a while into my practice, or the first Asian client that I'd worked with, and I was saying, if you could explain to me what steps you would use to access support before you might call, for example, services, they'll say, well, I'll talk to my family, I will try and kind of keep it within my community, or I will go to a place of worship or religion. Or I think from my understanding and my observations was that the support that they would be looking for is support within their community, or support from the people that they know, rather than reaching out to services to say, this is a problem, or this is something I want to talk about. And I think it was just more of my observations personally, and when I was talking one-on-one to people, it was about saying, well, social services is for children's, or social services is for this and for that. And when I say, oh, did you know that this was available? They just say no. And I said, would you have access to it if you knew it was available? And a lot of people, when they're talking quite honestly, they say still no, because I wouldn't want... I think it was just the fear of what happens after I've told you what goes on, or what do you do with the information then? And I think it was just that, well, who does this go to? Is it kept confidential? Or what will people think if I'm saying I have concerns about my mental health? What will my family think, or what will my community think? And these were large barriers that may have been preventing people from accessing it at the prevention stage. I remember at one point I used to actively say, and it was on our leaflet in like the first part of our team, to say, you do not need a mental health diagnosis to work with us. You do not need to have a medical diagnosis. You just need to just talk to us about it. And I remember saying, I'd always start every conversation with, if you don't want to see me after today, just say, Madiva, leave me alone. Madiva, I'm done. Or please, I'm ready to stop. And I will not chase you down, because this needs to be at your own pace, and that's what prevention is.
As a kind of Indian woman, I definitely noticed that for me, I've seen a stigma in my community with regards to mental health. I remember growing up with Indian parents who were first generation migrants. So, I think it's different being born here and being brought up here. So there was kind of that barrier between us. But I remember trying to talk about feelings and emotions with my parents many times as a young person, and they were just like, no, we don't talk about those things, and that was clearly very uncomfortable for them. So yeah, I mean, how do you find it in your community? I mean, you're a black woman.
I think I'm quite similar to you, because like you, we call ourselves first gen. All of my family were born and raised in Jamaica, and just that mindset of when they came over, for example, both my parents were born in Jamaica and came over. And when I spoke to my family, I remember when I was younger and I used to talk about how I was feeling, it was just you almost got told, just keep going. And then a popular phrase in our family was just firm it. Or when you might see an auntie on the street, not even directly related to you, but just that kind of respect, the aunties and uncles, because you knew they were all of the same or similar cultural backgrounds. You just, when someone's asking you, are you alright? It was always, yeah, there was nothing. It was very surface level. And if you were seen to kind of be talking about it in more depth, there was a stigma of, oh, you're talking out your business, or why are you offloading all this information to strangers? Even though you've addressed them as auntie and uncle and you clearly have that relationship, that was the basis level. And I remember even when I was telling people I want to become a social worker, I want to work in adults, I want to work with mental health, it was, what do you want to do that for? Or what are they going to do? Or they're just going to do this and that. And I was like, there's just so many, I think there was just so many stereotypes and kind of stigmas. It kind of prevented people, even when you could see someone was clearly distressed, they just would not talk about it. And even on a one-to-one basis, because I used to find that I would be able to get a bit more, for example, my grandmother, she was someone that was quite interesting to me. I called her my grandmother, she was my nana. The way she used to talk about her religion so passionately, and that was something she'd really go into. But when she was talking about feelings, it would always be, well, my God has me, he knows how I'm feeling. And she would talk so openly in her prayers about how she was feeling. But when I asked her how she was feeling, it was, why are you asking me those questions? I thought, yeah, just that kind of mindset, and it being passed down from generation to generation. And I feel like as a first gen and being British born and knowing that I could kind of talk about my feelings, but then on the flip side of this, my community, and it's not always necessarily welcomed or the norm, it was a bit of not a dilemma, but definitely something to process as a young black person kind of growing up in Britain.
And would you say that the communities of Hounslow, do you think there is a stigma there as well? I mean, both of us have experienced it, so I'm imagining that some of the people that you've worked with have kind of struggled to open up about that.
I think definitely, Rehmat, I can remember there was one time I went to go and meet one of my clients, and I don't want to give away any of that information. It was just, she was a young black woman as well. And I remember when we first saw each other, we both kind of just grinned and smiled. And I said, okay, do you want to walk and talk? Do you want to go to a cafe? She said she wanted to go to a cafe. And I remember we sat down in the cafe, and I was saying, at any point, if you want to get up and leave, at anything, I remember we positioned ourselves right at the very back of the cafe, and she was Somalian. And I remember we were just talking, and we were talking very low. I took off my badge. If you kind of glanced at us, I think you would have just thought we were friends having a catch up. And she had on a hijab, she had on her headscarf. And I remember we were just talking, and then a woman just came up to us, and she was just there like, sister, if you want to talk about how you're doing, come talk to me. And then she walked out of the cafe, and I was talking to my client. I said, did you know her? She said, no. But she knew that I was Somalian, and she knew that you were from services, even though I didn't have my badges on or anything. And she was saying, well, why are you talking to talk to us, don't talk to them? And I remember thinking, I understood exactly what she meant from like a cultural point of view. And she was like, okay, let's walk now. So I remember we took our coffees then and we started walking. And I said, a lot of my clients, I would say, if you prefer to walk and talk, that is fine, because the stigma is, oh, well, they're sitting down, they're talking to services, why are they doing that? And I remember consciously making sure that depending on who I was going to speak, addressing accordingly. So there was this kind of that I didn't look too professional, and you didn't see the Hounslow badge, so that they would be able to say, well, so and so, and then it became gossip within the community. But yeah, definitely there were experiences and times where I've noticed my clients having to actively, or there might be a shift in body language, or say, do you want to take a break, do you want to go to the toilet, because they might have seen someone from their kind of community come in and they don't want to be seen. Even though I remember doing a lot of reflection on it, I was like, even though we're both black and they're both young, women, we are similar cultures but different cultures. And I feel like the woman could tell very quickly I wasn't Somalian. And even though we were all black and we were all in that kind of that setting, it was us versus them almost. And don't go beyond the culture and go beyond your experience. I remember she was a key example of thinking, I recognise that there's a lot to even broach this stage of meeting in a cafe, a public cafe, and being tucked in a corner.
Oh, wow. So there was a woman who came up who essentially was kind of trying to dissuade her from accessing services because it should be kept in the community, right? Wow.
And I remember thinking, I don't know what to do here. So I was looking to go off of her point of view, and it kind of broke my heart a little bit, because I was like, I've tried so hard. I'm wearing my trainers, I'm wearing my jeans. This doesn't look like a social work meeting. This just looks like two friends catching up for coffee. And I remember thinking, I didn't have our backpack is just massive. I didn't have anything on me that I personally thought. And I remember saying to her, let me call for your lead, because the fact that we're even meeting today means so much to me. It means that we can progress. I remember thinking, I need to see how she wants. Luckily, she was very happy just to get up and go with me and kind of continue the conversation. But thinking, there was just I clocked her when we came into the cafe, because I kind of like to do a general who's in here, what am I like leaving points and stuff like that, and asked her if she felt comfortable. She said yes, because it was her local cafe. But I didn't realise that someone was maybe studying our body language, because we were talking very closely. This was pre-COVID days. We were very close to each other, and we were talking quite quietly because it was quite confidential. But the fact that she was able to pick up on that and jump in, it made me feel like I even to a point broke her confidentiality, because I said, and she was like, Madiva, this wasn't you. She watched us from the time she saw that, she knew that I was Somalian. There was just, she was going to come talk to us anyway. She was an auntie. She wanted to let me know from her point of view, it's okay to talk to us. But yeah, it was that. I remember thinking about that and just driving home thinking, what could I have done differently?
And in terms of your team, is your team quite diverse? Because I would imagine that this Somalian woman would have, I don't know, maybe it would have been more supportive for her to have had a support worker who was also Somalian.
So over the last 2.5 years, I remember when I first came into Hounslow and thought, this is the most diverse team I've ever worked with. There were Asian women, there were women who were Muslim, there were white women, there were all different age groups. I was 21 when I started. There were people in our team that were in their 60s and in their 50s, and there were male social workers. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, there are male social workers who are Muslim, who are black, who are Asian, and thinking, oh, this is great. So when people say you don't understand, I can say, would you feel more comfortable talking to so and so? It's one of the positives, and I think one of the strengths in Hounslow, because this was the first time I came into a team and I was like, there's so many. It's just it makes me smile even just thinking about it, how diverse the team is. But I remember thinking, there's not even a Somalian Muslim social worker that I could pair her with, you know, and I wouldn't want her to feel like she could only work with a Somalian Muslim social worker or, you know, professional. I want her to feel that all of our team were all, because I think because everyone's so diverse and has such different experiences, we are all aware of kind of the racial, the cultural, the religious beliefs that people bring in and what helps build you as a person. So it was all very understanding, and I think that was another strength as well.
That's really amazing to hear how diverse it is. That's such a strength of your team. This Somalian woman, did she continue to access services with you, or what happened?
She did. It was great. Afterwards, we went for a walk. I remember we walked around her block, and then she brought me inside. I remember saying to her, should I take off my shoes? And she was like, oh, no one's ever really asked me that before. I said, no. This is a question, even though we get told in social work, keep your shoes on, have all your, it was just kind of that cultural understanding and level of respect of you don't bring your outside shoes in. And she did engage with me, and I feel like, I remember she saying to me, you're being very open and honest. I said, well, this isn't going to work unless you know exactly what I'm doing and you have the trust to say, when I tell you I'm doing X, Y, and Z, you know that's what I'm doing. And then 2 weeks later, when you get a letter to say, because I like to write people letters, so you have a written confirmation of what I've done. She worked with me and she did engage with me a lot more than she even engaged with her previous social worker, and I felt like that was the strength, and we were able to close her case as per her wish because we were able to get the support and the work done. So we were able to progress after that initial meeting and then just move forward.
That's really amazing. That's amazing that you were able to support her, and I love that story about the outside shoes. I didn't know that was not just in the Asian community that you never bring in your outside shoes.
You just don't. There's so many things, and I feel like I remember because that in Jamaican culture as well, it was just. I remember my nana would ask me, where do you think you're going with those outside shoes? It was just so ingrained, and I was like, I never wear matching socks either, so I was like, please just excuse my socks. We were able to make a joke out of everything. I was saying I can't wear them outside, and even she was saying you can keep them on if you feel more comfortable. I said no, because that's not how you would want me to proceed, and I need you to feel comfortable. So little things like that was just so great. I feel like we were able to really just connect on an unspeakable level. You didn't have to explain why you needed to do it, you just kind of did it. But yeah, there's a lot of times where I walk in to, even when I'm going in to go maybe do assessments in the Asian community, and it's like, do you want me to remove my shoes? And she's like, yes please, yes. There's no offence being taken, and please don't take offence to the fact that I have to ask these questions, because in practice we're told, make sure that you're kind of keeping yourself, personal safety, especially since the COVID lockdown. But it's just great being able to kind of bring it back to that personal level of, this is kind of what we expect in our culture.
And having that cultural understanding, I'm sure that really means a lot to people. In terms of kind of coping mechanisms, I know that we spoke previously about some of the coping mechanisms that you kind of share with your clients, but I wanted to first speak about coping mechanisms for you through this time. What's helped you?
I know personally, I think around about August last year is when I actually thought about what I'm doing outside of work that brings me joy. I know that there was a point where I only had one plant before the lockdown, and part of my coping mechanism was every time I was doing a shop, I'd buy whatever plant. I feel like the staff in Asda know me on a first name basis now, but a large part of my coping mechanisms was doing something practical, so my mind didn't feel like it was racing and my stomach didn't feel, because I remember walking around with a ball of tightness in my stomach, and the only time it would feel like it was going is when I was out of breath, and I thought, okay, how can I get to this out of breath stage? Then my exercise went from being maybe every other day to every day, 20 minutes intense exercise, and then a nice half an hour cool down. So I remember exercise really increased and became a coping mechanism for me. And I remember thinking, when the tightness moved from my stomach to my chest and I felt like I couldn't breathe, I remember thinking, when I was younger and they told me, use your asthma pump, take deep breaths, there are times even now to this day where I stop and take in 5 deep breaths as deep as I can and say, do you feel better? And if it's a no, it's okay, go and feed your fish, or go and water your plants, or go and do something. And then feeling about, when I'm reflecting on the week, I'll be like, how well did I sleep this week? I know that I was able to drop asleep very quickly, but waking up in the morning was really hard for me. What changes and adjustments do I need? So a lot of it was exercise and keeping myself busy so that I wasn't sitting and kind of overthinking. And I feel like when the work increased, I was thinking, okay, these are the assessments I need to do, and these are all the things I need to do. And I'm saying, well, there's no point of me distressing myself about it because I can't start that until tomorrow. What I can do though is I can do my exercise and I can do my breathing techniques and then go to bed at least feeling 70% more settled than I was an hour ago.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even take time. I think it can just be like whatever time you've got can be really supportive. Do you want to share some of the tools and techniques that you share with your clients?
Definitely. I think one of the ones that we start with, when I'm usually meeting someone and they're talking to me about how they're doing, one of the first things I like to talk about is sleep and sleeping patterns. So I know the NHS has some really helpful information about sleep hygiene and about things you can kind of do in preparation for, getting ready to sleep, such as, what are you actively drinking during the day? I know a lot of us just have coffee on the go and might have fizzy drinks, but I'll be taking into consideration the caffeine content and how it impacts on our body. I know when we were pre-COVID times, it's not something we might have thought about because we'd be burning off the energy anyway, but when we're just sitting down and still consuming the same amounts of caffeine, how is it impacting on our sleep? So I think sleep hygiene is one I usually start with. And note down what time you're falling asleep roughly and how long you're sleeping for, and then thinking about how long you want to sleep for. So I would encourage, I think I like to kind of know how the person I'm working with likes to engage. A lot of people kind of like to write notes and keep diaries, so I say, okay, when I come see you next week, can you just keep a diary of how well you slept and how much you looked into the sleep hygiene stuff. I know that a lot of people were talking about, some of my clients who are smokers were talking about just being able to get out, smoke, have that breath of fresh air, So it was about, okay, there was something you found very calming about the in and out of the breathing of exercise. So maybe if you don't have your cigarettes, or if you're in bed and you're relaxed, but you don't want to smoke, but you're still feeling that anxiety, can we even just mimic you smoking to get those deep breaths in so you're feeling a bit more relaxed? So going off of the sleep hygiene, we spoke about breathing techniques. My clients who were a bit more tech savvy or had access to the internet, it was about seeing, on YouTube, a lot of people were telling me about great meditations they were using. So 5-minute meditations for anxiety, or for example, my manager recommended this app to me. It was called My Life, about kind of very targeted, depending on what's distressing you or what's impacting on you, would kind of navigate you to maybe kind of listening or meditation, or time out, should I say. It might be 15 minutes of just listening to the sounds and soft music, and that was something I was recommending a lot as well. For my clients who weren't online or maybe didn't have access to the internet like that, it was about recognizing, sometimes I think taking a step back and just being very honest and transparent are saying, okay, what are you doing at the moment as a coping mechanism? And don't try and kind of, feel like you have to put it in a way to me to make it sound like it's a good coping mechanism, or feel like I'm judging you for it. For example, drinking might have been, or drinking like substances and stuff like that might have been a coping mechanism. And we're just saying, okay, how does that coping mechanism make you feel afterwards? Do you feel like it's giving you the desired impact and effect? And if they're saying yes, it might just be about, okay, can we look at other ones as well? So you're not necessarily having just a default to that. And if they're saying no, we're looking at maybe, is there something we can do that's similar, that will give you very similar or give you more positive results? So for example, like with the smoking ones, people are saying, it's a habit I'm always trying to break, but it's not something I really want to do. I like smoking, I like what comes along with it. I say, okay. Or maybe in the times you're not able to smoke, then looking into the breathing exercises. Or for when people are talking about maybe drinking. Because I know, when we were in the lockdown in the summer as well, the days felt a bit longer, it was a bit brighter. People I would usually be in a pub, Madiva, this is what I do to unwind. And I do like the feel, I like being drunk, I like feeling a bit, lighter on my head. And I don't think there's anything you can kind of give me that will give me the same kind of level of satisfaction of that, or calmness throughout the night. And I said, well, that's fine. Maybe then it might be about exploring other things. It might not make you feel as happy or as good in like your belly or your soul, but is there something practical you might want to do? So like practical solutions might be your things to do. So you might have a drink and then tidy your home environment, or you might have a drink and do one of those things on your to-do list that you were putting off. So that after you've had your drink and you've done maybe 2 things on your list, you feel happy, and that ball of anxiety in your belly is a bit less. And then I was kind of trying to take it on a case by case basis, but kind of matching whatever coping mechanisms, because I was saying, you're resilient, you have found a way to survive up until now, you have your coping mechanisms in place. And sometimes people have their own coping mechanisms and don't even realize or identify it as one. So it's about kind of pulling out, what do you do to fill your day? And what do you enjoy doing? Is there any gaps in there? And then we can go from there. So that's kind of the way I was working.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think that will be really helpful for our listeners as well, just to kind of think about different ways that they can see their kind of daily routine, and maybe how they can make changes that are going to support them a bit better. I wanted to share a few resources as well for our listeners. So firstly, this podcast is in partnership with Hounslow Creative People and Places. And if you want to find out about what they do lots of different kind of creative workshops and creative things. So you can find more details at watermans.org.uk if you head to the What's On part of the website, or you can head to Take Part and just see what they've kind of got going on there. There's also a resource called Know My Mind, which is run by Mind, the organisation. And if you want some more details on that, it's hfehmind.org.uk. And on the website, you can head to Adult Support and then Know My Mind. And in terms of me, so I run mindful photography workshops. They're online 6-week kind of courses, and I have one coming up at the end of April. And I also teach yoga online, so you can find details of both of those things at orbwellbeing.com, which is orbwellbeing.com.
I know in Hounslow we have the community hub, and that works with people who are isolated, people who are vulnerable, people who need access to like emergency support, maybe like food parcels and stuff like that. At the beginning of the lockdown, I remember thinking I need to find out what services, not just in Hounslow, but like in the UK are available. So services such as Shout UK, text service, and it's free for all major mobile services. You can text at any time if you're feeling like you are struggling to help and you need immediate help. So if you were to text the number 85258, you can also access them on giveusashout.org. There are other services such as Ellie Friends, and they're a supportive community. It comes under Mind. I know you mentioned Mind as a service as well, and they offer carer support and services as well. I know that even though we're adult services and our focus is on adults, there are a lot of services for young people as well, such as The Mix. If you type themix.org.uk, it provides judgment-free information and support to young people aged 13 to 25, and kind of counselling support. That's something I usually offer to parents who are saying, you know, I don't know what to provide to my children and stuff like that, in terms of support. I know you mentioned the Mind services, but in terms of 24-hour services as well, there's single point of access. There is the Samaritans, and you can find out more information about them online. There is Silverline services that work with elder people over the age, I think, of roughly 65. They can offer kind of befriending services and groups, but it was just about kind of bringing awareness. If you were a Hounslow resident and you felt that you might access or benefit from the community hub, I know that's something they had up and running very quickly when we kind of responded to the national lockdown. I know I have a colleague that's working over there at the moment. They're kind of trying to get some new interesting projects up and running. But yeah, there are definitely services, even if you don't have access to the internet. I think that was one of the main focuses I was trying to look for as well, such as Shout UK. Even if it's just about reaching out. And our service as well, we still offer virtual drop-ins if you wanted to link in, or even if you don't have access to the internet and you wanted support, we can be contacted via our duty number, and you can just say, please reach out to me, and that's something we'd be able to do in terms of our duty and stuff. So it's just about non-statutory services, charity services, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be about mental health. If you're kind of, what's distressing you is money management, or debts that may have accumulated because you might be on furlough, or social isolation and wanting befriending, or not knowing where food's going to come from and you needing a food parcel, it's something, you know, the local authority could help you with, and even just to direct you to services that could do those referrals for you, or accessing your local church or your community service.
Amazing, thank you so much for that. And also, yeah, I've got the Samaritans number here as well. It's 116123. So definitely these are, I mean, Samaritans and Shout are free, they're anonymous, and they're always open. So Samaritans 116123, or Shout 85258, which you can just text to. Thank you so much for sharing those resources. And we're now going to participate in a quick mindfulness exercise. So we've both got our pens and paper ready. So if you're listening, please do grab a pen and a piece of paper, and you can follow along with us. So we're thinking here again about what supports us and what gets in the way. So the invitation is to draw a really nourishing plate. So a plate of food which is really nourishing, and it doesn't have to be like physical. It can be something that's nourishing to your soul, something that's nourishing to your mind, something that's nourishing to your well-being. So you can draw it however you like. You can draw actual bits of food, or you can, if you don't really feel like drawing, you can write different things. You can label them with how they support your emotional well-being or your mental health. So feel free to do it however you like, and I'll give us a couple of moments. We're both going to do it, so I'm going to do this as well, and then we'll share back. So let's take a couple of minutes just to draw our nourishing plates. Okay, and then I invite you to think about the things that kind of get in the way of you accessing your nourishing plate. So I invite you to, around your plate, either draw or write, and just a few things that kind of get in the way of you accessing that nourishing plate, things that make it a bit challenging, things that are a bit difficult. Okay, so how was that?
It was really interesting. I quite like that activity. I feel like it kind of it took me out, if that makes sense, of my mindset and what I was thinking about, and made me smile at the first part of thinking about what actually nourishes me, what makes me feel happy, and then looking at my room and thinking, oh my gosh, it's right there what I put in. But yeah, I found it quite helpful. How did you find it?
Yeah, it was I always find it really interesting actually sitting and stopping and thinking, actually, what do I need to be consuming on a regular basis? Because I think I can often not prioritize it and think, oh, I'm fine, or even just not even realize that some of the things that I do are actually really helpful for me. Like just some of the things that I do without really thinking are actually really, really supportive. So I'll just share what was on my plate. So I've put a cup of tea, which I've actually labelled that as sleep, but I think also just the act of having a cup of tea and just being like, actually, I just want to nourish myself with this warm cup of goodness. Like, it just feels so good. I drew actual bits of food and then I kind of labelled them with what they represented. So I put salad, and that for me is about kind of downtime. This is a really odd meal because it totally doesn't go together. I've put fruit. So there's just like a random bit of fruit on my plate. And that is all about all of the passions, all of the things that I love to do. So photography, anything creative, like watching movies. I'm loving this painting, like just things that really like fill my soul. And then I've also put roti, which is like a staple North Indian kind of part of the meal. And that for me is connection. So it takes up most of my, kind of half of my plate. And just being able to connect with loved ones and being able to just like pick up the phone and have a chat, or even like go for a walk with someone, like that has been so supportive for me. And then in the middle, this isn't even a piece of food, this is just the sun, which I've drawn in the middle of my plate. And that for me represents nature, and nature has been so supportive for me throughout this time. So yeah, I just absolutely loved that. And then the things that get in the way, the things that are around my plate, I've put time, energy, work, which are probably all quite standard things, but I've also put myself, because I've realized how I can get in my own way so often. When I don't prioritize myself or prioritize kind of accessing this nourishing plate, and I put other things in place of that, or I guess I don't realize the importance of it, and I will just decide to do something else instead. So yeah, I put myself there as well. How about you?
My one, I was gonna say, in my plate I was putting a lot of the things I could see, so I was trying to relate it to food items. I put my fish tank as one of them. So even though I was thinking I don't eat my fish, they're in my room, but yeah, I was thinking fish in terms of, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have salmon for dinner. That's something I really enjoy. It makes me feel like I'm kind of hitting my food groups and I'm enjoying it. But also, like, just behind my screen I can see my fish and I know that they bring me joy. This sounds a bit bit weird, but like I love after having like an intense conversation, or if I've like felt really distressed in a call, I'll talk to my fish and be like, this is how I felt and this is what I don't need to tell you what I said, you heard what I said, but just like knowing that they're there just makes me feel so happy. Like even when I'm feeling like a bit frustrated or a bit down, just being able to look over at them, seeing the colours, seeing that they all work. Because all of a sudden there were 90 fish that appeared in my tank. I don't know who gave birth, I don't know who they belong to, but they just all seem so peaceful and they just got along with the older ones. Like I just see all the age groups, it just makes me so happy, and I feel like they really work together as a community. So that kind of linked onto my community, my family, my outside family, like knowing that even if I haven't reached them or been able to see them in a long time, when I pick up the phone it's like I just saw them yesterday, and having that support. I think some of the practical ones in terms of like my plants, it just nourishes me and that makes me feel happy. And one of the key things I think I learned in lockdown, definitely, I have a car, her name's Lili because she's light blue, and I just love her so much. And even I feel like I didn't realise how much I just used to jump in her and just drive around and just like drive until I found a park or drive until I found a new area, and I was like, this is really nice. Those are the things that kind of were in my plate of nourishment, and feeling like almost free, feeling like I'm not being bogged down by any kind of I feel like Lilo, or my car should I say, is one of the things that made me feel like this is one of my happy moments. And when I was kind of thinking about what gets in the way of that, some of the things I was thinking was like money and kind of my money management and my finances, my anxieties both professionally and in my individual life, the lockdown restrictions, because I think I didn't realise how important it was to me, and part of my kind of downtime was just driving. So I enjoyed driving to and from work, I enjoyed driving to the gym, or even if my mum said I want to go to the shop, I enjoy driving her to the shops. And feeling now that I'm trying to be in line with the restrictions, I can't just be driving around willy-nilly, and work time scales. And I feel like a large part of what gets in my way is something that I didn't realise until recently, was my mood and the impact that my mood might have on my willing and wantingness to engage in what makes me happy, and then what impact my mood might have on my mental health. And I know it sounds really funny because I'm a mental health social worker, but I was just there like sometimes I didn't realise that I was in a bad mood because of something that happened in my personal life, and this impacts, I can feel myself frowning, but I'm not thinking I'm frowning, I'm just thinking I need to get on with work, until maybe I need to go to the toilet. I'm like, I've been in a bad mood all morning. I hope it hasn't come across in my work, but what can I do to kind of alleviate it? And then I might talk to my fishes and say, yeah, I'm in a bad mood, and just be like, yeah, they understand what I mean, feed them, and then jump back in and feeling a bit lighter. So I think that exercise is just, it made me really smile. I had my plants, talking to my plants and watering them. Sometimes my colleagues can hear me going shh, shh with my water bottle when I'm on the phone to them, saying, I'm so sorry, you just happen to catch me. I'm happy to talk, but you happen to catch me when I'm watering my plants. It takes like 20 minutes, but like all these things, like you're saying, very similar. You put down the sun, I put down stars, because I always associated nighttime, clear nights, driving my car and being, I know my colleague recently, blessed, she brought me one of a star, and I was just trying to find it, and like all these things just make me so happy. Like, yeah, sorry, I really enjoyed this exercise. It was so cool.
I think it's a really nice one because it kind of encourages us to have a think about what actually does support us, and think about maybe ways that we can see the things that get in the way as maybe not things that get in the way, and maybe finding new ways to access our nourishing plate. Yeah, I find it really, really helpful. So yeah, and that's actually one of the exercises in my mindful photography course. So yeah, it's a good one. I thought we would finish with a pledge. One thing from my nourishing plate that I'm going to do within the next 24 hours.
I think one thing I'm definitely going to do is get all the stuff out of my shed to look to repot my plants, because I feel like when they're growing and they look happy and healthy, some of them are just so dramatic. If they're not in sunlight, you can see them kind of wilt down. I'm going to make sure that they've got the food and the nourishment they need to kind of keep surviving. and I work in my room as well, so just to make sure that I can enjoy them visually. So I think that is my pledge for today.
Oh, that's beautiful. So my pledge is getting out in nature. So yeah, I'm gonna make sure I get out on a walk today, even though it looks a little bit grey today. I'm gonna make sure I do it and just fill up my cup. Thank you for sharing these like really supportive resources, and also for sharing your experience through this time. I think we can get so stuck in our own heads and not kind of realize how challenging it can be for the people who are also providing support. So thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you for taking the time out to speak with me today, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me in today and just allowing me to share my experience and to talk to you about it, and thank you for being so understanding as well. Thank you.